Today I'm going to show you exactly how we rebuilt Lifetime for $50.10 using n8n, BigQuery, and Replit. If you don't know Lifetime, they're a Shopify app that charges up to $500 per month for profit and loss analytics. They connect to the Shopify store and ad platforms, and their core feature is this dashboard with bar graphs updating every 50 minutes to show real-time net profit. Let me show you how I built a similar working app myself. So there are three main parts to making an internal lifetime tool, and those are: one, setting up all the data processing in n8n; two is hooking it up to BigQuery right here, and then three is to setting that up with nice front-end interface through Replit. So if we go back, let's kind of dig into this node by node. First, you'll notice I have a backfill this year workflow and then a update current day workflow. The reason I have these two is because I first want to backfill the whole year of data. That way in the app, you could go and look at more historical trends. And then once that whole workflow is done, then all I need to do is just update the existing day every 50 minutes to, again, simulate what Lifetime is doing in their app. Now, if we look at this first node, what it does is it creates one item for each day of the year. And I have the times start from the very first day of 2025. So there's 265 days so far in the year. So that's why we have 265 items. Then we looped over all of those items, which again takes like, I want to say 30 minutes to an hour. And as it goes through all this, I actually have a wait node with 5 seconds, mostly just for the Shopify APIs. Because what I've noticed is that one gets rate limited a lot quicker than Google Ads and Meta Ads. So I literally had to have that in there in order to process all of those days. So then if we go into this first one, this is a Shopify API call, and we are calling the orders.json, and we're just pulling all the orders in that date. And what I've noticed with Shopify is you cannot pull the same date for the minimum and the maximum range. It needs to be like, if you're pulling data for the first, it needs to end at the second. That's just how their system works. It's different from Google and Meta, where they just want you to put one date for minimum and maximum. Then for fields, I'm pulling all of these here. So everything I would need in order to pull accurate numbers for the final output. And then I have this pagination on just in case there are more orders than one page could hold. This would just iterate over all those pages. So after this, we push it into the parse Shopify orders. So what the parse Shopify order node does is it just pulls out all the individual orders it finds in the call. So here it ended up being just 2 items. Then up here, what happens is we need to get our COGS, our cost of goods sold. And the original orders.json does not have that. And there is a very specific process you go through in order to pull the cost of goods that is set up in Shopify. So in order to do that, what I do is I process the line items. So what that entails is pulling all the variant IDs and product IDs through which the next API calls are going to iterate over. So it found these specific codes here. And if you notice, the next node is actually calling that variant ID. And after we pull that, once we do that, we want to pull the variant item ID. And that's when we finally get those hard costs for the item. Then what we do is we parse it just to have what we need. So this basically functions as a mapper. So finally in the merge node, we're merging those two things and also the Shopify's API customer data. So the reason there's 4 different API calls for Shopify is because there's not a single one that gives everything you need. And you basically need to do a bit of extra work to match all the data together, right? So like in one day, there might be one customer with 3 orders and 2 different products, right? So the goal is to get the cost for each individual product, to get the total cost of the orders, and to match it with the customer as well, in case you ever need to do like a new versus returning customer analysis. So that's what all of this is for. And once you merge it, I just use a append mode and push it all into another code that organizes the data for me. So, this code, what it does is it just for, a daily kind of metric, it organizes the data in a way that it could be processed accurately. So now after that, we just get a Shopify summary, and that just gets all the, kind of final metrics based on the total volume of orders and customers on that day. So yeah, I would say this is definitely the most complex part of this whole workflow, but it is necessary based on, Shopify's API. And maybe that's why live telling for a long time was a great tool to use, because no one actually wanted to figure out any of this stuff. But now it's possible to figure it out relatively quickly. And then the next nodes are pretty straightforward, actually. So Google Ads, we're mostly just pulling the cost micros, which is just another format for cost. To do that, it's usually the same URL. Don't forget developer token, login customer ID. And then here's my query to getting that cost. And like I mentioned earlier, the between dates are the same, unlike Shopify. Then I also call and get the Google conversions. Again, a lot of this is extra, but I'm assuming that down the line, there might be extra analysis that might be needed. So that's why I think in this particular scenario, it's okay to over-engineer a little bit, because it's not like you're spending that much more energy or tokens in order to do this. And then finally, I have the Facebook API, and that is grabbing all of those fields here, which includes spend and action values, which have the conversion metrics that I'm looking for. What I found interesting with this is the conversions and conversion values actually did not show the purchases, which, kind of threw me off for a little bit. But then when I dug deeper, I just noticed they're all bunched up in here with engagement metrics, which was obviously a bit off-putting, but you just got to work with what you have. So you just see there's like a bunch of different metrics all pushed together under one field. And finally, you see the offsite conversion Facebook pixel purchase, which is what we're looking for. So once all of that is pulled, I'm putting it into another merge append mode node. And I just put it into another code node to, summarize it again for me. So this is like a ready output for BigQuery. And the next step is just to insert it into the table that it needs to go to. And I have auto mapping on. And then again, it's important to set up the BigQuery table first, and to set up the credentials to make sure that, you're actually accessing the right account to do this. And, you could copy my exact tables here. I have quite the number of stuff, and I'm probably not using majority of this. But again, I think I built this in mind where I'm assuming there might be more functionality that I'll need later on. So that's that. And then if we look at the next workflow, this is the one that runs every 15 minutes. And it's gonna be very similar to the one on top, but now I don't have a loop because I don't need to loop over multiple items. It's just one item that gets pushed through every 15 minutes. And then for that first node, it's also gonna be different because we are now just pulling the current date. And here, the time zones actually be very critical because, with 15-minute intervals, you're gonna want to know what time zone you're pulling with. I am defaulting to New York, so Eastern Standard Time, just because in the US, that's like the standard time zone that people usually reference the most. And here, another thing that's different is actually the BigQuery query, because here, instead of operation insert, I'm doing execute query, because we want to either replace an existing row of data or we want to create a new one, right? So it needs to go through that logic to figure out which is the right use case. And for that, I had to build this whole, very customized SQL query to make that happen. And, we're merging the table as a target and then literally spelling out exactly what we want added, or when it's matched, we're just updating it. So yeah, the idea is if it's not matched, create it, but if it is matched, then update it. So that is what makes this BigQuery table that I called daily summary. That's what makes this production ready for Replit. So now, if I just query this just to like show you what's in here, and then we don't need that. There you go. All right, so yeah, as you can see here, oh, this is not in order, but basically there's 266 items, one for each date. And although I don't have this ordered, you could tell that, I have every single date here with all the data that n8n prepared for us. So once the data is accurate in BigQuery, we can now move on to Replit, and I'll show you exact conversations I've had with the agent to get us to that final product that I showed you in the beginning. So obviously I'm going to skip all the boring stuff, but here's the main thing that I think is important. First, we created design version of the dashboard using Claude, and here's what we kind of told Replit. Create an Next.js dashboard that reads from a Google Sheets, populated by n8n automation. So note that this is saying Google Sheets because when I started, I thought I was gonna, push the changes to the Google Sheets. I realized I'll have more than 250 plus different rows, and BigQuery is just more of a scalable architecture, especially if I'm gonna go up and do 2 or 3 years of backfilled data. So, but the dashboard functionality pretty much stayed the same. So we pulled the latest row from Google Sheets or BigQuery every 15 minutes, display lifetime style P&L chart and table, and show real-time business metrics without any calculations. All formulas and data aggregation already done by n8n. That also is not true. That started to be done by Replit, especially for the weekly and monthly data. And then technical stack, again, we already discussed the BigQuery, then chart showing total sales, marketing costs, COGS, net profit, auto refresh to sync, read-only access to pre-calculated metrics. And then I also shared a screenshot of what the lifetimely dashboard looks like. So it was able to literally take that almost directly and apply for this app, which I thought was pretty neat. So if we look here, next, it went ahead and created that dashboard and also created a comprehensive plan to integrate with the existing n8n workflow. So it knows exactly what we're working on here. And then, and here's where I showed the image of what that dashboard looks like. So if you notice, it almost got it exactly like perfectly aligned with the picture I sent. There's a couple things that we ended up removing, but this is very close, which I think is awesome, right? So that's definitely like hack there, is to just show the interface that you're trying to copy if you are trying to copy something. So once the design has been done, it added the password, it created everything, and then let me see if the preview is pretty quick to show. Might take a while. All right, so it looks like this is what we had at this point, which looked pretty close to being done, but this is all fake data, and there's like small tweaks that you just don't think about that this currently does not support. Like you can't click the time period to change the dates. So yeah, this basically took care of the 80% of the front end interface is done at this point. It's just now literally a majority of the time working in Replit was to get all the buttons to work the way they need to, and just getting it from 80% to 95% done, right? So that was the cool thing though, that this was literally like 2 conversations deep into Talk to Replit. It already built this. So you'll notice that these agentic models are getting more powerful every month. Like when I played around with Replit like a month or 2 ago, it was not this good. Like this is like next level. Like Agent 3 is really powerful. And whenever Agent 4 rolls out, it's probably gonna be even stronger. When we get to like Agent 7, then you might be like pushing out dashboards like this in 3 or 4 iterations. So another cool thing that happened was I actually used BigQuery for another project. So we just literally recycle those credentials for this one, which worked in my case. But I would just ask it, hey, like I have my data in BigQuery. Walk me through what you need in order to integrate with that. And it will tell you, okay, I need you to either make a service account or to create a OAuth 2 authorization. And here is what I want you to put into the credentials, like it's called secrets in this case. So in my case, I needed just a Google Cloud project ID and a BigQuery dataset ID, which came from BigQuery directly. In your case, you're probably also going to need service account setup, especially if you're using Replit for the first time or you're just setting up BigQuery for the first time. Just ask the agent what you want to do, and it will help you do that. And also with Agent 3, a cool feature of the Agent 3 model is you could either build, plan, or edit. And for example, here, if you are setting up your BigQuery credentials, you probably want to plan. And when you plan, you're just asking questions and like strategizing how you're going to build things. When you build, it literally goes and builds it. And then edit is also interesting because you could, in the preview, just select exact variables that you want to change. So now it has context of what you're referring to. And then you could say, hey, change the text from enter dashboard password to something else. And it will just know what you're talking about because you selected it. So those are just some cool features from the Agent 3 model that you could use. But yeah, I would say once you figure out how you're gonna set up the credentials to access the data, then it's a matter of just tweaking and basically through words, like, explaining what you want to see different in the app that you built. And yeah, there were some times where I've been like really stuck. What really helped me was always going back to the plan model and just asking like deeper questions that would, get closer to the core of why things weren't working. Like a very specific problem I had, which was really hard to solve, was for some reason, whenever I went back, so let me go on the current working version. So a problem that I had was when I went into earlier days, it didn't push anything, right? Right now it's September, so September days were just fine, but then the earlier days showed zeros. And if I just pushed things in build mode, it didn't really fix anything. I had to go into plan mode and literally ask it, why do you think this might happen? Like, give me exact bullet points. And then I found one where in the logic, it like basically only loaded the past 30 days by default and it kept it that way. Maybe I'll find that part for you real quick. So here's where I was getting into a bit of an issue. In time period sucks, can you make sure it's not possible to select dates that are not available? So I wanted to make sure that, I know I have data from the 1st of January of 2025 and later. So I just want it to not show anything before that in the selection. So I don't want it to be able to let the user select anything before that time period. So if I go to like December, that's all blocked out. So that's what that did. And then, yeah, for a long time, I was not able to figure out why it didn't let me select dates I knew were there. And then, yeah, obviously I got a little bit frustrated and that didn't help. Like usually it doesn't just figure out through brute force, like why it doesn't work. Saw that the problem was that there was a limit of 30. And then again, it said it fixed it again, but still didn't work for early dates. And then I was like, okay, did you forget the password? Here's the password, still not working. And then it looks like I ended this chat. All right, so here's where I figured out where the problem is. I asked why it thinks that the data is currently not showing anything earlier than 30 days. What are the possible reasons for why? And then actually started thinking, and it showed me like it thought was the data restriction. So it found that the problem, number one, BigQuery data daily query limitations in whatever file currently limits set to 30. So I was like, okay, cool, let's fix number one, the first problem you found, because the limit shouldn't be 30, it should be 365, because that's 365 days. Cool, so we went ahead and fixed that, and I skipped the test, but yeah, that fixed that whole problem. So sometimes when you help it reason a little bit, it ends up finding the solution quicker, which is really cool. So I just want to share one more problem that I came across when building this. When I published the app, it didn't work. So The development version, like it was pulling data perfectly, everything was fine, but for some reason that did not kind of push through to the published version. And that really frustrated me as well, because I'm like, dude, this is ready, this is done. Why are we still having issues? So again, kind of went back and forth on nothing really, all caps, because I was just not having, I was like, it is late. I've been working on this hard. I need to make the video, so just make this work. And yeah, like again, what I ended up finding that helped solve this issue was actually the logs. If you go to publishing, there's logs under here that show, what the server is pushing back. And one thing that I saw was authenticated false. So the authentication was just not working. And, that's what I shared with Replit. And, that first part didn't tell it anything. That's like, you better fix it. And then I showed it the authentication issues, and then it's like, oh, that's the issue. So, it has good enough context, but still needs a push. And you still need to like really think through some of the problems yourself and dig through like what areas could be causing those problems. And then it's like, okay, well, now I understand what I need to do. The issue is session persistence in production. Your login works, but the session doesn't persist between requests. So ended up removing the code that was causing that issue, and then it worked perfectly. So yeah, again, there's probably 10 or so of these little problems that to go through. The other 8 were more design problems to make the front UI, work cohesively with the BigQuery data that I had. But in the end, we have a nice final product, and I could now deploy this across multiple clients as long as they all have the API set up correctly. I think that's about it. So that's how you rebuild Lifetelling's core P&L dashboard for only $50 flat instead of paying hundreds of dollars per month. You now also have full ownership and control over it, so you are welcome to do whatever you want with it. The data updates every 50 minutes just like theirs does, and it shows real-time business health. Email me if you want any resources in this video, and also drop a comment letting me know what projects you're currently working on for your business, because I feel like right now there's so many different use cases, and I'm just love to see what you're working on. So yeah, stay tuned for my next project.